right, we'll get started. Hello. Thanks y'all for coming. My name is Bo Revlett. This is the advocacy meeting for the HPI board. We will go around and do introductions. I'm Bo Revlett. I'm on the HPI board. I think this is my last meeting as the chair of the advocacy committee because I'm rolling off the board. But it's been great to be with y'all. So.
I'm Carrie Hernandez. I'm with the Lexington Housing Authority. I work with the landlord part, recruiting and finding housing.
I'm Diane Fleet, Greenhouse 17, and chair of the HPI board.
Marty Jones, Community Action Council.
Billy Love, member of the board.
Erica Dominguez, Lexington Rescue Mission.
Bruce Davis, HPI board.
Sammy Bearfield, Kentucky Refugee Ministries.
Christy Alfaro, Kentucky Refugee Ministries.
Kitty Collins, Mount Comprehensive Care.
Kimberly Boyd Wayne, Goodwill Industries of Kentucky.
Jennifer Bergman, Goodwill Industries of Kentucky here in the Lexington region.
Jamie Cody, Bluegrass Care Navigators.
Claire Hancock, Independence Place.
Eric Evans, Housing Advocate, Independence Place.
David Schatt, and Poetry.
Christina Ellison, Nubian Bluegrass.
Marissa Webb, Continuum Care Coordinator.
Adam Boone, HPI.
Jeff Herron, Manager, LFUCG, Office of Homelessness Prevention and Intervention.
Hi, I'm Lily and I'm with Civic Legs.
All right, so before we do the minutes, I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of the announcements that were made as we made introductions. As Bo had mentioned, this is going to be his last meeting as chair of the Advocacy Committee. I just would like to take a moment to thank Bo for all of his work with the HPI board, which definitely goes beyond the time that I've been in this role. You've been with us since, is it 20, like,
A long time.
or so,
I think
maybe?
18.
So definitely a lot of great service has been provided to the board and the continuum. So we really thank you for everything that you've done. Also want to acknowledge two board members that are joining us. One who's here today, David Schatt with the Hope Center, who I'm sure everyone probably knows, as well as Chris Primo, who's currently on leave and not with us today. We think that they are both excellent representatives for our continuum, and as we unfortunately lose someone like Bo, we are glad that we are going to be joining with our new partners on the board, David and Chris. So thank you all both for your past and future service. And then you're welcome to proceed with the approval of the minutes.
All right. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes that were in your packets? Is there a motion to approve?
And that can come from any member.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So we'll move on to new business. We've got a presentation from Goodwill.
Again, we have Jennifer and, do you prefer Kim or Kimberly?
Kimberly.
Kimberly with us here today from Goodwill Industries. They have been doing some great work in the Lexington continuum. That includes working with LFUCG and Fayette County Public Schools on the Hands Up for Housing program, which is targeting households that have McKinney-Vento students, try to connect them with assistance in getting into permanent housing, both with financial assistance and employment supports. We really appreciate the work that they've already done here in our continuum. But they also had wanted to share some additional information about services and programming that they're currently operating in the Louisville area. One of those items is some of their transitional housing programs. Here in Lexington, it's been a little bit of time since we've really pursued a lot of transitional housing. Of course, part of that is just a general shift within our field, and then some of the specific attempts that we've made at transitional housing Some of those have not been necessarily the best fit for our system. Additionally, we typically focus on housing first approach, which would have no preconditions for entering housing. Since some of the elements of their model might include, having transitional housing as the focus, or potentially some requirements, we did want to make sure that before we would even consider taking on those projects that we would interface with our board and membership. We want to give you an opportunity to learn more about what their model is, what their outcomes have been, so we can all consider if it might be a good fit for us. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Jennifer and Kimberly.
Thank you all for having us today, and it's been a pleasure to work with Jeff Herron and Commissioner Jonathan Wright on our Hand Up for Housing program, and it's going very well. We just appreciate the opportunity to try to help people with housing who are in a really bad shape with kids in the school system, and there's been so many. We appreciate going to those partner meetings and finding out more and having a chance to help them with better employment. So we look at a job, a better job, and career is the model that we're trying to work with. But that being said, housing is really something that we struggle with. It's our number one barrier. We look at 10 different barriers to employment when our career coaches work with clients that come in the Goodwill Opportunity Center, which if you may not know where that is, it's been there several years now under that brand, and it is on West New Circle Road, right next to the Goodwill store over there. And we are serving over 1,000 members this year alone. And some people do need a lot more help than others, but housing is our number one barrier to employment. It's just really hard, and you all know that. I probably don't have to tell any of you about that. So I see a lot of faces that we have worked with in the past and currently, and partners. We appreciate our partners so much because we cannot do it alone at Goodwill. It's just so important. We can do a lot, but there's so much that we need our partners to get it all done and help the person in a holistic way. So with that being said, Kimberly Boyd Lane is my wonderful counterpart. I'm the Regional Director of Career Services here in the Lexington region, which includes Lexington Opportunity Center, Moorhead Opportunity Center, and 2 federal grants. One is for 55 plus in 51 counties. That's not Fayette County. It's a CSEP program. And then we have an 18 to 24-year-old Ignite program in the Opportunity Center that works with justice-involved young adults. But Kimberly has a really big responsibility to Goodwill. It includes our Phase 3 housing program. And I would like to introduce her as the Regional Director for Community-Based Services and many other areas too. Kimberly.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here today. I do cover 3 of our opportunity campuses in Kentucky, 2 primarily in the Louisville region, Jefferson County, which is South Louisville and East Louisville. Our South Louisville campus is our bilingual campus, so everything is bilingual, staff, branding, and all of those things, providing those wraparound services, putting people on their pathway back to purpose. I have the good fortune of also overseeing our Hardin County, which is in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, that opportunity campus as well. Has a different dynamics because we have quite a few veterans and individuals who may be coming out of substance abuse. I have Another Way program, which is a grant that we run that works with unhoused individuals, providing them work-based learning opportunities, putting them back on the pathway. And then we work with our TANF and SNAP recipients, providing training and career development for those individuals, our financial wellness team, and then our housing and transportation team. And so today I will be talking about our Phase 3 housing. Our housing approach is not necessarily a housing first approach because we were looking more at a transformational housing. While we are utilizing our career coaches, getting individuals into employment, after they have gained employment, they are assigned in our housing program. They receive 6 months of subsidized housing. That means we take care of all of the bills, all of the electricity. The apartments are fully furnished. They're 2-bedroom apartments. with the shared common area, and then a shared community space where we have group meetings, group sessions with our mental health provider, as well as AA meetings and NA meetings. The model designed, we initially started by saying, okay, let's address the housing issue with the caveat of, yes, we need housing, but they need other things. And so we found that once we got individuals into employment, what was missing was that housing piece. So each person, after they have been in employment for about 90 days, they are referred into our housing for a 6 to 9 month supplemental housing. During that time, they are connected with a financial coach that works with them on decreasing any debt, addressing any barriers that may be where they have to dispute certain things that are on their credit report. If there are evictions that are there, try to help them to make those connections with those landlords to get payments started. Because if we can get those payments started, then we have property managers that work with us to move them into independent living. Unlike other housing programs, our success rate is primarily if we move them into independent housing, not necessarily subsidized housing. Not saying that we haven't moved quite a few individuals into subsidized housing, but what our CEO considers successful is that there are no assistance when it comes to housing at all. So during the time that individuals are working with us in our housing program, they are asked to meet with our career coach as well as our housing specialist, so that we can make sure that the housing that we place them into is within their budget parameters, but it also is going to be convenient for them to get back and forth to work. So are we looking for partners? We have partners that are on the bus line or that may be close to the employment opportunity that they have. Last year alone, in 2023, we successfully placed 81 individuals into independent housing, but we had over 150 that came through. So that's the ratio of what went into independent housing. We had another 50 that went into subsidized housing. So when you kind of look at the difference between those that are going into independent housing and into subsidized housing. I know when we work with our partners that are transitional homes, they have a lot of parameters as far as, okay, it's housing first, and then we'll work on getting the job. So we have those partners as our phase 2 kind of partnerships for individuals who may not be working, and we collaborate with those individuals to place individuals into those opportunities until they have gained employment. Once they have gained employment, then we transfer referral over into our housing. One of the great things about our housing partners that have transitional homes, that we can subsidize that payment for them. So some of our transitional partners have a fee, I want to make sure I say the right word, because I'm like, they charging them. But the fee that they have for them is probably about $100 or $150 a week. We've also had individuals that we have found partners that have rooms for rent that individuals can go into, and we will take care of the first month until they can get on their feet and gain employment. When you look through our packet, it kind of gives you a feel of what the housing requirements are, and we're saying that they are required to be a member of our Opportunity Center. And the reason why we make that a requirement, because we really are trying to look at the entire self-sufficiency matrix, because we know that if housing is a barrier for you, there may also be some mental health issues that we can address. There may be health issues that may need to have to be addressed. So we want to make sure you get connected to Medicaid or Medicare or some other kind of health provider, because healthcare and housing, I feel they walk hand in hand. Food, any kind of food insecurities, as well as transportation. It could also be that they have legal issues. So we want to make sure that we get them partnered with our legal aid partner. And so taking that holistic approach to moving them from where they are to where they are wanting to go, we want to make sure that they gain some kind of skill set. So while they're in our transformational housing, we're teaching life skills such as apartment maintenance, getting them connecting to some of our housing partnerships that come in and teach classes to them about making sure that they have rental insurance. You know, we don't think about that, but when they're working with their financial coach, we add that into the budget. Looking at the data this year, we have currently placed 62 into independent housing, and that number has decreased only because management. We closed down some of the scattered sites so that we could contain and have more control over some of the needs of the individual. So we have one facility that has 77 beds, and then we have one scattered site that have 8 beds that are there. We're changing that scattered site into our phase 4 housing, and this is where they're gonna be able to transition smoothly into that independent living opportunity. The property manager has agreed to allow us to vouch for them while that, you know, irregardless of what may be on their record as far as credit is concerned. That financial coach is working very intensely with budget. So we're looking at not just the budget that they have, that they want to put on the paper that sounds good, but also the honest budget. You know, like how much are you really spending on cigarettes? You know, how much are you spending on Coke and chips? You know, because that could be something that we can work on. Not telling you that you can't do that, but look how much. So we had a young lady that was spending over $200 on just chips and Coke. And she realized I could use that same $200 and apply for the Cars to Work program and get me a vehicle. And so that was her aha moment. So we use everything that is in our power to provide those teaching tools for them. We also want them to be able to understand how to read their lease. You know, because sometimes they don't look at the loopholes that are involved in some of the leases. They're just signing their name off and they're jumping in, and then they don't realize if they are late one day, there's a late fee. And that late fee, the longer you're late, there's more late fees on top of that. So we wanted them to get ahead of the game. The other thing that we have as just a requirement is that they do have some kind of behavioral and mental health assessment, because we want to be able to know whether or not they're able to have that independent living. We have several individuals who've come in with the hopes to go into their own apartment, but the stress or the anxiety of living alone was just unbearable for them. Some of the participants that I've talked with said to me, I've never lived by myself. I went from my mom's house to homeless. And you know, I've been on the street, and you got me in the apartment, and we're having to do this. I don't know how to wash my clothes. So we have a class now that teaches them how to do laundry. I mean, what we think are common knowledge are not so common for people. And so we want to just make sure that we're meeting them where they are, and that they have a sense of support all around them, so that they can be able to have the quality life that they desire. If you look at some of our facilities, each one of the each one of the apartments are furnished with some nice furniture, and these are really great apartments. When we look at the apartment's value on the market, it's about $1,500 a month that Goodwill is investing in each one of the units. In that particular facility, I have 77 beds. So, you know, we're striving to make sure that we keep those beds filled, because whether someone's in there or not, we're still paying the rent on those opportunities. But they're fully furnished, and we want them to have a sense of, this is what you should strive for as far as where you sleep. And you can have peace in this place. They have built friendships. They've even built relationships that when they moved out, some of our individuals have decided to become roommates in their independent living, because they were roommates while they were staying with us. And so I think that's all I have to say about it. Any questions?
I'll definitely have a couple of questions to start us off. Some of this may be things that we've had conversations about, but just for the benefit of the group, I might wanna go back over. So one thing that I was interested in was making sure, you had mentioned, for example, some people transitioning to transitional living options in Louisville, where you're operating this program currently. Can you talk a little bit more about what those transitional living options are or look like?
That are our partners.
Yeah.
So those are, they may be housing that provide IOP plans for individuals who may be dealing with substance abuse or coming out of incarceration. They have their model of how their housing first model, and that's fine. And so for some of the people who come through that may have a relapse or may not be ready for our independent living, that's one of the partners that we utilize. We have about 15 partners so far in Louisville that we utilize for that transitional housing. That's why I say we kind of call ourselves transformational. So we want you to transform the way you think about housing while you're there. And so we utilize those phase 2 partners to as a preparation to our phase 3.
And some of the transitional living partners are also kind of probably what we would consider like sober living homes.
Sober living homes, yes, sir.
Okay. Just trying to connect dots for people in the room.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
You're fine. And then with respect to the housing units that are specifically within your phase 3 program, can you talk a little bit about if that is housing that you own, if you rent that housing, and what kind of like partnership might be there?
So we have a lease agreement with our Fincastle landlord. So we're not actually the landlord, and the reason why we didn't want to be the actual landlord for the facility is because we do offer a lot of opportunities to individuals who've gained employment through our stores. And we wanted to make sure that we separated being your employer and your landlord so that there was no bias that was there. And so our landlord, Omar, owns the actual property at that one facility. We have the Hulu network that owns our scattered sites. And so we lease the properties from them. And then that way they're getting payment through goodwill for the facility. So there's no contracts, but there are agreements. And so the agreement that we ask the participants to sign with us is, I agree to attend my meetings with my coach and my financial coach, as well as the housing specialist. I agree to maintain employment. If employment ceased, then I understand that I am required to seek out additional employment working with my career coach so that we give them 2 to 3 weeks to regain employment. And that's not something that they have to do independently.
So those are just a couple of questions that I wanted to make sure everybody kind of have a full snapshot of information that I kind of took away from our previous conversations. But definitely want to open it up for our members and board members to ask questions of our partners at Goodwill about their programming model.
I just wanted to add something. You may have said it, but I don't think I heard it. The way that we help them to save money straight into their own bank account, and that's what helps them get started on their independent housing.
Yeah, there were 3 things that I left out I just thought about when he was talking. Thing number 1 is we do background checks and credit reports. So we do run those to make sure that there aren't any issues on their credit report that will prevent them from entering into independent housing. So that we can be able to negotiate with maybe some of our property managers to say, I know that when you run their credit report, you may see an eviction. However, there is a payment plan that's in place for them. I know that there are certain backgrounds that your facility does not allow, so we wouldn't make referrals to them, because what we don't want is for people who've been broken to hear no again. So that when you said that, I was like, yeah, we don't want them to keep hearing no. So we want to let them say no to us, and then we're able to make that connection. They are required also to save at least $450 monthly. This will give them, after their 6-month period, a total of $2,500 in their savings account. We have several banking facilities, credit facilities that assist them with that secure banking or banking savings account. We help them open up those accounts. But one of the great things is when they transfer into the independent living, for those who work with Goodwill, we provide a $1,000 down payment. For those who do not, we do a $500 down payment into that house.
So again, open it up for discussion. We have focused pretty exclusively on a housing first model, and we haven't done a lot of transitional housing lately. So this is kind of an opportunity that, what I say is, my office wants to make sure that we are looking at all the different needs within our system, that we are offering individuals choice in housing, and that we're offering them a variety of different arrays of housing that might potentially meet their needs. I don't want to necessarily unilaterally make decisions for the continuum about what kinds of housing that we offer. But definitely we would want to make sure that the things that the board would vote to put funds behind would meet our needs and would be something that we want to pursue. With a opportunity like this, we would definitely have to put out something like a formal RFP if we wanted to pursue this kind of a model. But just wondering, what our thoughts are as a group in terms of, do we want to remain firmly on the track that we have been, or do we want to potentially try to diversify some of the housing stock that's available within our system? So I really view this as an opportunity for us to rely on some partners who have done this work and can maybe answer questions that we might have in order to kind of come to that decision.
I just had a couple questions. You mentioned the different phases. Does everyone go through those phases sequentially, or is it more individualized?
It's more, everything that we do is individualized. So we have a phase 2.5, which is individuals who are working with Goodwill. They're able to enter in after 2.5 weeks of employment, and they are there for 90 days. And once they've reached that 90 days, they're working intensely with their career coach to make sure that they're prepared for that savings requirement that starts at that 90-day stance.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I mentioned it mentions on the handout about participants cannot have a criminal background, but then I know you mentioned that you kind of talked to properties about that. So I was just curious if there were certain things in the background that may exclude them, or if that was
we have two issues. There are only two charges that we do not allow in our housing, and that is sex offenders. We do have partners that offer housing for individuals who may have those particular cases, and then the other is arson. And that's just because it's too difficult to find a landlord if there's arson on someone's background that will accept it. So we're not trying to say, okay, you're with us and now you have to go back to the streets or something because I can't find a place.
And I want to add to that. I don't know that anyone in this room, what your knowledge of Goodwill is, but we are a second chance employer, and we don't just keep it at second chance. It's like third, fourth, fifth, 10th. So we just keep working with people as long as they come to us and they are continuing to work with us, and they don't just drop out of sight, and their motivation is there, and they're doing what they need to do to work through it. We will continue helping them, and that includes with our employment, that includes in the opportunity centers to help them to even get to a good job with benefits, full-time job. That's what we're looking for. So I just wanted to mention that we are a second chance employer. Fair chance employer is another word that has popped up a lot lately because it doesn't just limit to the second chance.
I mean, he really just hit on I was going to talk about the criminal background, but I'm guessing that, I'm assuming that through the phases, like if they did have a criminal background, that they could seek expungement, or you all would help guide them towards that phase 3 process.
Yes, ma'am. For anyone who has a background, and if they meet the criteria, which means the offense was longer than whatever the statute states. We are already working on getting them their expungements because we have a program called Erase. Our Erase program, when they come into the Opportunity Center, we send them through that. Then we have our expungement clinics that we hold across the state. So if they're not able to go through our Erase program, where as soon as they come in, it's like, okay, I got things in my background. Okay, well, let's see if you're eligible for expungements right now. And then we pay the cost of all of that as well. The other thing that we do is we have partners that if we're not able to serve them in certain areas, that doesn't mean no. That means we can't do it, but we know someone who can, and we make that warm handoff. Because that's what's important to us. I find a lot of people over the years that I've done this work, they get lost going across the street sometimes. You know, it's like, you gotta go over across the street and Sue will be waiting for you. Well, from there to Sue, something happened, life. And so we do a lot of hand carrying when it comes to warm handoff. When you go to the property that you're moving into, we're there with you as the landlord saying, okay, make sure you check for this, make sure you're checking for that, make sure that this is gonna meet your need, because you don't wanna sign the lease and then talk about the problem.
Thank you.
So I had a question. For full disclosure, I worked for Goodwill Industries in Colorado for 5 years, and they saved my life. Goodwill does incredibly good work. So my question is basically, I worked for a program with them called Possibility for people with disabilities.
I was just there.
Were you?
Yes,
So
I
you
was.
probably met some of my folks in Colorado Springs.
Yes.
Yeah, I was their community liaison. I was an instructor. I did a lot of different things with them. So my question is geared towards the folks you may have that have disabilities and they have disability income, because you're saying that, you know, a lot of times you're working with people that have employment, but they also have that income that they have to balance between, you know, not losing their disability. So how do you work with that particular?
So, yes, so with individuals who have disabilities but are willing to work, we do have, that's why we have our financial coach that's working with them, because we want them to have an understanding of stable accounts or able accounts, because that allows them to have some savings and being mindful that, yes, you can work, but let's monitor the number of hours so that you don't go over your benefit threshold. And then helping them to get into, and those are some of those cases that I said, they didn't necessarily move into unsubsidized housing, but they got into subsidized housing, and that's one of the main reasons, because they did draw benefits, and we were able to get them into either senior apartments, other HUD partners, through New Directions, through the housing partnerships.
See, I'm still working with people with disabilities, so that's my niche.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have a lot of people with all kinds of different various disabilities that might be a good fit for your program, that, you know, might want to talk to you about a possible partnership and helping some of them that we find difficulty in finding housing because of their disability.
Yes.
I have 2 different couples right now that need to find first floor units or units with elevators because of physical, and also disabilities like TBI and that type of thing, that might still also be able to work, so.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I think that my team did a great job of doing. I charged them with not just sending people to apartments because they had apartment listings, but actually going to the apartment, property management, and introducing themselves, letting them know that we're gonna be sending people, and then we make agreements with those property managers. To say, now most of to come back to what you were talking about, most of the units that we have, well, not most of them, all of them, that we have in Louisville are single dwellings, not family units. However, we have property managers that offer family dwellings. So it's like, we can't do that, but go over there and talk to Bernardo. He has a house that he's renting out, and he's willing to accept you into the housing because you have been a member of our center.
I'll give you my business card. My organization works in the 17-county area around here, including Fayette County. But yeah, I'd definitely like to talk to you more about possibilities.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. And I love Colorado, by the way.
Oh, I do too. I'll have to talk to you after this.
Yes, but I was gonna say, yeah, the possibilities and journey. It was like a junior achievement facility.
It really was, yeah. So you saw the possibilities program.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
City inside a warehouse. Yeah.
I just had a question about, so your phase 3 requirement, that an individual be substance free for at least 90 days. Would being on like medications for opioid use disorder, the FDA-approved medications like methadone or Suboxone exclude someone from this program?
No,
Okay.
because that's something that we would have in advance of notification. However, we do monitor whether or not it's being abused.
Okay.
Because some people use it more than, or I don't know, I know they get it distributed to them. But there are some situations that we've had that people who were abusing it somehow, that we had to address that issue with that.
Okay.
I'm always amazed at the work that Goodwill is doing too, so I kind of mimic that there. I'm so immersed though, like what Jeff was saying, in Housing First kind of program and voluntary service sort of program delivery. So anytime I see requirements, I start kind of getting a little eek. And then, but listening to you, it's just like rules in the wrong hands can be kind of spooky. Listening to kind of all the wraparound services and things that you do, and the second and third, fourth chance that you were talking about. So that's always just sort of my dilemma. Housing to me, as many of the people around here, is just kind of a human right, and so anytime that something's gonna bump somebody out of housing. So is it my understanding a little bit that if a rule or requirement is kind of broken, they just might move to a different phase? We might just sort of reapproach and reevaluate, or like drug testing always makes me a little nervous, so a little bit what you all were just talking about a second ago, if somebody does have substance use, that doesn't always get in the way of job and employment.
Right.
So how do you handle that?
So, number one, it's really kind of looking at two things. They may have a violation that's kind of what we call it. Oh, there's a violation. But that helps us to identify what other supports you need. What was it that made you relapse? Because it could have been, we had a young lady that was coming into the program, and when she signed in, you could tell that she was just like not ready, but she was working. Well, I don't want you to lose your job, right? Because there are some other things going on. And so we helped her to get into treatment. We were able to save her job because she was working for us. We were able to save her job because we had the connection with the career coach to say, listen, here's a situation. We're going to send her to Isaiah House for treatment. And when she gets out of there, her bed will be ready for her when she gets out. Because we want to provide that support. So relapses are not an issue. We do have partners that, like I said, we're not going to put them right back out on the street. And the main reason why we're not Housing First is because we're really not social service. Even though we do social service kind of work, we are employment services, we are career services, workforce development. And we know that in order to maintain employment, the other hiccups, the other life issues have to be addressed. So we want to show people how to navigate through life. There may be supports that are needed, there may not be supports. So we use a lot of our Housing First partners to help us navigate people until they're ready for that next phase.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And it's always done with care, and I have to say
I hear
this.
that very much. I worry, I've heard it not done with care with other agencies, but I very much hear that from you.
Our CEO is one of the most amazing women that I've ever met. And I say women, but I'm talking about person in general, because everything that she allows us to do, and it is that, it's like we bring in ideas like, hey, we would like to do this. And she's like, well, how does that look with this? But she allows us to do whatever it takes to make sure that a person is not chained to the bondages of the system, right? And so how do you go back and get those dreams and aspirations you had before life took you on a detour? How do you release the prisoners of the warfare of life? If I'm mandated to do X, Y, Z, I'm not really living the life that I want because I'm mandated to certain things. Well, an employer is always going to have some kind of stipulation for you to, you have to show up to work, and you have to show up on time. So we're just kind of trying to leveraging that to say, okay, as you're meeting your work requirement, here's the other support that you don't have to worry about anymore. So we've had individuals who were unhoused in our Another Way program, and we put them up with our transitional partner for 3 months, where they were they were managing paying some of that rent. You take the first month, they paid 2. Like, okay, you've invested in yourself. Move on into our housing because you're maintaining that employment. Now you can save and address your back child support. You don't have to spend that money on that. Let's help you to navigate so that when you find an apartment, it's not gonna be a cost burden. Because that's what I'm looking at right now is in the data is, are we moving people into housing that is a cost burden or is it within their means? Because if it's a cost burden, they're only gonna be there for so many months before now we're gonna be looking at eviction. So how do I help them to get an improved job status so that they can move up into their opportunities for housing? Because some housing, yeah, you can get it, but I wouldn't want to live in it, you know, and I don't want them to have to say that this is all I can get.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question that's kind of, I think specifically for myself and the board members. I know throughout the presentation, there's been references to things that you all maybe don't do in-house, but that you facilitate through partnerships with your existing program. Just curious in terms of getting a scope of if we were to potentially pursue this kind of a model, if we put out an RFP for it, understanding like what kinds of partnerships maybe already exist here in the Lexington area. How would this replicate here in terms of, is it really reliant on having those established partnerships that you have in the Louisville area? Do you already have partnerships here? Are those things that you all can quickly generate? Just really trying to look at what the scope would actually be in terms of what would we be able to facilitate where we would pursue something like this.
So I will say that across the state, we have phase 2 housing. That's something that we provide, and that phase 2 housing is where we look for, we have partners, and I know Jennifer has partners that she utilizes for her phase 2 housing that provides that support. And those are the transitional homes, sober living homes, right? I don't know how many do you have so far?
I don't have a certain number, but we have quite a few.
Quite a few, so that would be like our first development of that phase that's already in place. And so it would come from that pool of individuals if needed to say, okay, you may not qualify for phase 3, but here's one of our partners that we're currently working with. And we at Goodwill, we've paid up to $1,500 per person in our phase 2 housing. So, I mean, there is an investment, and that comes from your generous donations to our stores, because 90 cents of every dollar goes into our programming. And that's how we're able to do that. The money goes back to the people that we serve. And that's what keeps me with Goodwill.
Well, and I want to answer a little bit more about what your question was referring to with regard to partners. We had an opportunity of $100,000 with a specific partner probably a couple years ago, and I think I may have told you, Commissioner Jonathan, when we met initially. So that was looking like it was a go, and you know, my top leadership in Louisville, corporate, CEO, COO, VP, they were saying, go ahead and try to find a landlord who's willing to work with you in Lexington. So we tried to find housing opportunities, you know, that were scattered sites like Kimberly was talking about. It was very hard to find. We found some, but they were just honestly in horrible shape, and the cost was high. So that was not looking great. And then I found a landlord here who I was very happy to find, and you know, he was ready to start working with us, but then the funding changed. Their opportunity changed to bring that money to the table with us. It just at the last minute. So it was really disappointing because, you know, I was about ready to launch it at that point, and it just was like, okay, we can't do this right now. You know, it's not never, but right now we can't do this. So that's when, you know, I started trying to look at other opportunities for partnership and funding, and LFUCG, the mayor, the council, or the, you know, a big part of the housing need. I live in Lexington, and I know what the housing situation is here. And then, of course, my office is in the Lexington Opportunity Center. I'm there a lot. I speak with our clients every day, at least, you know, some interaction with clients, talk to our partners, work with partners all the time. So we try to be very nimble with regard to developing new partnerships, because that is a big part of what we do. We rely on our partnerships, and I talked about that earlier. So we would want to do that, and trying to find someone who is supportive of this model, because we know that it works in Louisville, and that's what we want to do. Is the people we're serving through the Opportunity Center, and the people that maybe some of you are referring to us to help with, as Kimberly said, it's not social services. We're not just trying to put a Band-Aid on there. We're trying to make a difference and help them with skills, readiness for workforce, and it is workforce development, it's career services. And so we're trying to help with a job, a better job, and a career. And that's the direction we're going in. And if that person is ready, the sky's the limit. But we need to help them with housing. And so trying to find a partner and a landlord, we would not be purchasing, any kind of property here. Based on what Kimberly said, that's the model, that's how it's worked there. It doesn't mean it's never gonna change, but that's the way it is right now, and that keeps Goodwill free.
If we were to pursue funding something like this, we would typically do in pilot funding and dollar amounts that probably wouldn't sustain purchase of property.
Right, but it's a
So
start.
we would probably be looking to do that similarly as a scattered site. And I know that we have at least one ARPA-funded attempt at transitional housing. One of the major challenges that we had there was the identification of landlords and housing units. They initially had pursued a master leasing model, which, as my friends at New Beginnings know, we think is a great thing because it guarantees that a landlord's going to receive payment because they have an organization that is on the line for that money. They also have an organization that can help with things like damages. And they know that the rent's going to come, and it's going to come on time each and every month. But for whatever reason, we've had a lot of challenges in Lexington with landlords accepting master leasing, where the lease would actually sit with the organization. And that was the same thing that the operator, Mountain Comp, of our ARPA transitional housing program found. So we also, I went back and said, well, you responded to an RFP, this is what you designed, we don't have any kind of requirement that's saying you have to do master leasing, let's open up and find rental assistance partnerships with landlords. And that did help to some extent, but there were still some challenges in identifying affordable units, or units that potentially would still accept some of our individuals with things that they might have on their background, or just units that were at a level that maybe somebody would be able to quickly transition to being able to maintain that rent independently without assistance. So not that it can't work, but just in our most recent experience, that was one of the challenges, so just kind of interested in knowing what.
So I can say that we don't just have this model in Louisville. We also have this model in Bowling Green.
Small.
It's on a smaller scale. I think I have 6 beds in Bowling Green. That is the same model of the phase 3. And I think we had one phase 2.5 that was in there that moved into phase 3. They still have phase 2 all over the state, like I said. So I could use that, and we can look at that of how we develop that piece, because where we had massive beds in one unit, that used to be an old apartment complex. So trying to find those partners, but then having support from other people, it kind of leverages, what the landlord is like, hey, you're not gonna be in this on your own. Goodwill's gonna be paying the rent. And we're doing the background check, and that was some of the conversation we had to have with the landlords is, we're getting someone that has a clean background, we're getting someone who we're vouching for, because you're not gonna be out of anything because we are paying the rent. However, with that being said, who else do you know that will open up an opportunity after we've subsidized it? Because that, to me, not the subsidized part, but the afterward, and so that would just take us really, making some intentional partnerships and collaborations with property owners.
Well, and I want to say that the landlord that I was ready to go with, he was interested in doing not scattered sites, he wanted, larger buildings. and they were newer. So it was not like a slumlord situation.
That's a relationship you still have in your back pocket.
Well, it's back there. I don't know what he would say today if I went to him, but I definitely was keeping my options open with him, and I've touched base with him several times. So, you know, certain people are even interested in building new locations. So just to find a partner, I would love to, if we did this in Lexington, to find a landlord that would be willing to do it in one location like we have at Fincastle. I mean, whatever the number of units, it wouldn't necessarily have to be all of our units in that building, but maybe it's split. But it would be so much easier to manage it and, make sure that it's gonna succeed. If it's all over the place in Lexington, that's gonna be a lot more complicated. So that's just, I wanted to throw that in.
Yeah. And I also would be interested, for myself and I think for the board members, it would probably be helpful to know both like with the smaller program in Bowling Green and then the program in Louisville, if we could have like a rough sense of what the annual operating budget for those programs is. And I know that may not be information that you have.
Well, I've sent that to the
Today.
commissioner and Jonathan. I don't know if you got that initially.
Okay.
That was like when we first started talking about it, just kind of a sample budget of what that might look like. But, I'm not sure if that was perfect. We were just trying to get started, and I sent that as a way to give them an idea. And I don't, it depends on the scale. What is the scale? So it was not the scale that we did in Louisville, but it was something.
But knowing maybe what the scale looks like for Bowling Green
Right.
would also be helpful. That would kind of give us two different counterpoints to where we could kind of think about the level of funding that we would potentially want to commit to something and what it might actually translate into for our communities.
Perfect.
And one of the other things that I didn't mention that I probably should have is our facilities have resident site managers on location. And so that is to address any immediate needs that may occur overnight. We provide the housing to our resident site managers as well as them being on staff. So our staff in Louisville consists of 3 housing specialists and 3 resident site managers. 1 for the female unit off-site as well as the female floor, and then the other 2 for the male units. And then in Bowling Green, we have a housing specialist assist with them.
So whenever you place them in the housing, are they responsible for their utilities?
We cover the utilities and everything because what we want them to be able to do is not, now it hasn't been without challenge, okay? But we want them to be able to save their money, not say I got extra money, right? So that's kind of why we say, whatever else you do with your money, that's fine. I want you to begin to save $450 because if you're gonna be moving into a place that's $950, right? You're already accustomed to saving $450, so you know that you have that. And you can pay up a couple of months to get so that you're not necessarily starting off like, oh, how much am I gonna have to pay? And then that extra support that we provide is that down payment. So utilities, we average, what is the average utility cost for that particular property? So we add that into your budget so that you will know exactly how much you are gonna need to make, number 1, whether or not you need to look for a better paying job. I know you love working here, but that's not gonna meet the living costs that you need. So we're gonna look for an improved job status so that you can be able to afford the place that you wanna go into. And what I've charged my staff with doing is, the moment that they sign in, your first initial meeting, find out where they're wanting to live. Let's not wait till month 4 and 5 and 6 when it's time for them to move out. Let's begin with the end in mind. What area of town are you looking at? Let's do some research. What is the average rental cost in that area? And if you're able to afford that, then how can we get you into that particular property? Because you can sign up now saying my anticipated move-in date is on this day.
You said earlier that there were over 150 people who came through the program, I think last year. 81 were placed into independent housing and another 50 went into subsidized housing. there's like 20 or so left.
Those 20, they went into what we would call not just our subsidized housing, they went back into transitional housing.
Okay.
Either due to relapse or into, or just, they was like, I don't wanna have to do this.
Yeah, and so, but there's always some placement into other housing. People
Yes.
aren't just like released.
No, we do everything in our power to include when violations occur, to say, okay, this is not gonna work for you right now. And so if they're going into treatment, we get them into treatment. But then after treatment, we already have a partner that's gonna be there so that when they come out of treatment, they're going into an IOP or transitional house that can provide them that support. For some individuals who are saying, I don't wanna have to do all this stuff. Well, it's free will, you know, we don't wanna force you to have to follow rules. Some people, they don't want to. And so what can we do to assist you? Because every person is a member of our Opportunity Center. So whether or not you stay in housing, you're still a part of our family, and we still wanna provide those supports that you need to ensure that you are overcoming the barriers to the quality of life that you have, or that you desire. And we can't tell them what's gonna make their quality of life better, because for some people, they don't mind sleeping outside, you know? And so for those, we have our Another Way program that kind of works with them to say, okay, we work with the unhoused population, and here's what we can do. And we wanna make sure that you are utilizing your skills and giving you back dignity by earning some skills and using your skills to help out in the community while putting you onto your pathway.
And then you talked about membership in the Opportunity Center. What's required for membership?
Okay. So it's not a lot, but it is something, and that's just for them to invest into themselves. So when they come into our Opportunity Center, and this is all across the state, they have to attend orientation. That's one of the caveats that we ask. We also ask that they attend at least one of our training classes, and that's normally our soft skills class. And during soft skills, we talk about attitude, self-presentation, we talk about dependability. We also go over conflict resolution because we want them to have the skills necessary to get to the next level. So we go to our soft skills class, that makes you a member. They receive a little membership card, you know, and so they have their little card and they flash their card around like, I'm a member. And that's just so that we can build a sense of belonging. Because for a lot of our people who've come through our doors, what I've seen over the last few years is that they've been lost at feeling like they're out there all by themselves. So here's a place, it's a judgment-free zone. Whatever you're doing, you're doing. Now, when you're ready to do something different, we're here to help you to draw that map to that different.
I want to say part of our orientation and what goes on to finalize that process, they do a self-sufficiency matrix, and I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but it's the 10 different barriers that we're going to be looking at. And the first one we do is sort of that initial snapshot of where they are at that day and time in all 10 barriers. And there are 5 different levels for each of the barriers. And there's a description on the self-sufficiency matrix of what it looks like if you're a number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is empowerment, you're doing great. 1 means you're at the very lowest level for that barrier. So they're gonna work on figuring out where they belong in that continuum for each one of the barriers. And that helps our coaches to be able to help them with each one of those barriers, knowing where they are and looking at what is the most important thing that they're gonna start with when they work with them.
Any other questions for our partners at Goodwill? I want to make sure we do have additional time for our other agenda items. Want to definitely thank you all for making the effort to come out and speak with us, to share your experience and successes with this program, and to answer questions. I know we threw a lot of those questions at you, and definitely appreciate your thoughtful responses.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it so much.
You are welcome to stay, but also if you have somewhere else to go, I understand that as well.
Is there anything that you feel like would be important for me to hear? Because, this is my home base. Lexington is my home base. Kimberly is in Louisville and many other places, so she did us a favor to come here. But, we support each other as directors. This is our team, and we're there for each other, whatever it is. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate you. That's totally up to you. We just have a slight agenda for this meeting. We're going to do mostly continuing business updates on a couple of things. For our office, we have our federal COC program application and winter planning, so we're definitely busy at the moment.
Well, I'm gonna leave my business cards up here by Jeff, and so if anybody would like to get that, and Kimberly Boyd Lane's card will be up here as well. So we would love to hear from you. If anyone wants to get a card to me before I leave, I'll wait up at the corner there for a moment. But definitely just reach out to me, and I'd love to talk, and partnerships are really important. So thank you.
So much.
Yeah, I'll do that now, so.
To make sure we get through everything, we are also gonna transition into continuing business. Before I turn over to Marissa for a couple updates, I noticed that I have failed to keep an item for continuing business on National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. We have been doing some separate committee meetings with a group that's doing the planning for that event. Just wanted to make sure that we shared with this group a couple of updates. One would be the next planning meeting. It's gonna occur on Thursday, November 19th at 9:30 a.m. and that's gonna take place via Teams. I will send a meeting reminder out approximately 2 weeks before that meeting with the meeting link so that anyone that wants to join us, even if you've not been a part of that planning committee in the past, feel free to join us. Also wanted to share with you the date and time for our event. Even though this event oftentimes takes place on December 21st, we recognize this year that that falls on a Saturday going into the week of Christmas. So we anticipated a lot of challenges in terms of attendance and participation. So we have elected this year to hold our event on Thursday, December 19th. And that's gonna be 5:30 at Christ Church Cathedral. The majority of our scheduled activities will take place there at the church, and then we're gonna close with a candlelight vigil where we're gonna travel to Tandy Park, which was the site of last year's event. That kind of gives us a space indoors that if people don't want to participate because we're gonna be outside, then maybe they'll join us when we are inside. And also helps us to still maintain the visibility of the event with that candlelight vigil. And we also have quiet indoor space without traffic and sirens and things like that so that we can hear each other and take away the power of what people have to say. So we will distribute flyers in advance, but just wanted to go ahead and share now that that date, time, and location has been finalized. And I will also, again, be sending out a reminder approximately 2 weeks in advance for the November 14th planning meeting. Now, Marissa Webb is going to give us a couple of updates, including lived experience engagement and a program standards update.
So starting first with the lived experience engagement, our meeting that we had for folks was September 30th, and that conversation was designed to be centered around how we had implemented the feedback we had already solicited concerning funding decisions for the COC competition. Unfortunately, we did not have anyone show up. I was not sure if it was just the lack of word that got out to folks, or we know previously, right, it's been explicitly stated that compensation would be provided, and this time it's not. I'm not 100% sure. However, we have made a lot of efforts with folks that were that had expressed a lot of interest in our funding decision by reaching out via text, email, and calling them. And we've been able to meet with a big handful of those folks and explain, if these were the priorities that were identified and established, things like spending all of the grant money moving folks into housing really quickly, things of that nature, right, that you've already said, this is what we want. We have implemented that in our scoring and ranking document, and furthermore, bringing it even more, right, from high level into what folks are actually seeing. That means that this program scored really well in this area, and they received more funding. They received fully funded, they were fully funded versus maybe a program that you identified as, I don't want a project to be funded if they aren't willing to, do everything they can to spend as much of their money as they can. They're leaving money on the table. That's something that's really important to us. So we've allocated funding from those programs and instead given that funding to our programs that are high performing. So explaining that, kind of having those one-on-one conversations with folks as they've texted me and reached out to me saying that they would be interested in having those conversations. We really want to demonstrate and show that we're not just soliciting feedback, but we're implementing feedback, and then what is that real world implication of such implementation of feedback. So that was something that was really helpful for us, and I think is a good model. I just watched a webinar that was all about lived experience engagement, and a lot of the struggles that we have here in Lexington are struggles that other communities are having as well, right? How do we adequately compensate folks? How do we have an ad hoc committee that is the same folks consistently? How do we support folks with lived experience? Continue to provide feedback, and that's something that we are working towards. But now that we have several folks that are consistently showing up and also emailing back and texting back, saying that they're interested in, maybe it is more of a let's have kind of a one-on-one conversation as we're making these decisions, and then thinking of ways that we can broaden it out to just greater feedback, doing surveys with partners in places where folks already are, and especially as we move into winter, I think that this is a really good opportunity to have a really solidify some of our programming, especially for the winter months and then thereafter, because we know that this time next year we're going to be having a conversation about ADC competition as well. So that way we can have some of that repetition of what our expectation is, that way folks know, and also have hopefully some movement on some of the barriers that we're facing. Any questions? Okay, then I will move right into program standards. On September 25th, the rapid rehousing, we had a program centered around our rapid rehousing standard. We had a really great conversation, and I know that I solicited feedback from you all if you participated in program standards, just asking what went well and what didn't. And I think similarly, I heard some really good feedback from that meeting, where we were able to talk a little bit more in depth about how these standards are actually applicable to your program, what standards are we maybe not meeting, and what standards are we actually excelling, where are we going above and beyond, and should we document that as that should be the standard for everyone, right? Not just your program, but all programs that fit into this categorization. Those drafts and edits are still underway, which we have been working on. However, CSC competition has taken priority. So we are moving that underway, and we expect that those will be included in the next meeting packet for Advocacy Committee. That way folks can review and examine. And in the interim, in between that time, on November 20th is going to be our PSH standards meeting. So come November 1st, everyone who has a PSH project should expect an email from me. That is going to be November 20th, and that is in the 5th floor conference room of the Phoenix building, but I will be sending that out as well, so that way you have that. Any questions? That's all I have.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll open it up for issues and public sharing not on the agenda. Anybody have anything going on in their world they want to share? Yeah.
Tomorrow, there are 2 events associated with Lexington Public Library. Pardon me. north side will have an expungement clinic from, I think, 11 to 3. And then at all of the locations, there's a take-home job fair, which is aimed towards folks with justice involvement in their background. So basically, it's a first come, first serve. You can take a bag with information in it, and then presumably we'll have that information to share afterwards, even when the bags are gone. And that's at all the locations.
And was that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Okay.
We said the public libraries?
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody else have events, announcements, news they want to share?
I don't really have anything, but I like to chat, so I'll just say Civic Lex came out and did a staff meeting training with us at Greenhouse 17 for about an hour, just sort of talking about how local government works and where you can really make a lot of difference at the local level, because we tend to get really focused on the national level. So it was just really good for staff to kind of appreciate that, because we're always talking about fiscal courts and da-da-da-da-da. So I just encourage you, if you think that would be an interesting thing for your staff, Civic Lex is awesome. So that's my plug. They were really good.
If there's nothing else, then our next meeting is going to be adjusted slightly from our normal schedule. We usually meet on the 4th Wednesday of each month. However, we did not assume that you all would want to meet on Christmas Day. So, and I will be at home, hopefully, off work. We will be meeting instead on the 3rd Wednesday, which means program performance and evaluation will also be bumped up a week. But this committee will take place on December 18th, same time, 1:30 here at the Dawn Ball Campus Center. Also, you can anticipate that in November, we will be approving our 2025 calendar year meeting schedule. So definitely be on the lookout for updates from our office. We will also be sharing the approved calendar on our website and social media. Try to make that as easy as possible for folks to find, as well as distributed through our mailing list. If there's nothing else, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
We adjourn.
I knew I could count on you, Bruce. Thank you all. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us.